Welcome to the next part of the supervisor training. As we think about the role and reason for peer support workers and peer specialists, we also need to be thinking about the changes occurring in the mental health delivery system in 2013. First, though, let's define what we mean by the system, because we'll be talking about it a lot, and it's easy to think that we're talking about the hardworking, dedicated professionals that show up every day. When we talk about the system, we're talking about a mammoth entity of service delivery settings, providers, service users, regulations, funding, and a type of culture comprised of beliefs, traditions, and unspoken but powerful rules. When we learn from experience that components don't work and need to be modified, a process of systems change begins. But the gears move very slowly. Early adopters start the process, and over time, more buy-in. There's a natural push and pull to all change, with 2 steps forward and 1 back. In this training, when we use the term system, we're often talking about the embedded traditions, unspoken rules, etc., that are in conflict with the direction we are trying to go. And we are indeed in a system of flux and trying to make change in 2013. This is a process that really took hold in the 1980s. The mental health system has always lived between 2 masters that are frequently at odds, provide good mental health services and public protection, whether needed or just perceived. This has led to a system that for a long time has focused on taking care of, with heavy utilization on medication, strong value on compliance, and patient deferring to the power of the experts and stability as the goal. Over time, however, the voices of people in recovery helped the system to identify some flaws in the theories that had been directing mental health care services. People were seeing that the amount of control over people had unintended results. People's spirits were being broken, and they were being disabled far more by learned helplessness than whatever the original emotional distress was. As Pat Deegan so eloquently states, help is not help if it doesn't help. And the system was beginning to see that some of the help was indeed being more harmful than helpful. People were really starting to see the impact of a deficit-based, problem-oriented system, where people start with some distress that must unfortunately be put into a diagnosis in order for any treatment to be able to be funded. Within this framework, people begin to see themselves and are seen by others as having a disease, a mental disease that comes, of course, with a huge helping of stigma and discrimination and changed self-images. If the distress is significant and someone is unable to work, they must also try to get onto some disability benefits, where the person has to prove that they're so disabled that they can do virtually nothing at all, and over time begin to believe that that is true. When you can do nothing, you become, of course, dysfunctional. And it's not just with Social Security that you're being confronted with the idea of what you can't do, but also in the therapist office with your psychopharmacologist, sitting in day rooms or partial hospitals, or sitting alone at home, feeling stripped of who you were with no idea of who you are. Very often, it's the cumulative effect of messages that end up to be devastating over time. In the end, people become disempowered in their treatment and disempowered in their own lives. Then it's no surprise that people also feel despair. And in the end, despair is the great killer. It's the despair that leads to suicide. This deficit-based approach has developed over a long time. No one really planned it this way. In fact, most of the things that contribute to this D-list came out of genuine care and concern. A psychopharmacologist tells someone that the only way is to take this medication despite the side effects is speaking from a place of genuine care about the person's welfare and a deep belief that what he or she is saying is true. A parent or social worker who tells someone that they shouldn't consider work because it will be too stressful is, again, speaking from a place of goodness and compassion. And so we find that we are all involved today in a system that wasn't planned to be harmful, and yet there are pieces that are not helpful. And that is the system that we are together trying to change, because again, what we know is that help is not help if it doesn't help. Though very well-meaning, if it doesn't help, it doesn't help. And we want to be active members of bringing about a change within that system. These efforts took a leap forward with the 2003 Presidential New Freedom Commission report entitled Achieving the Promise. While this report is now 10 years old, the research done and recommendations made are as relevant today as they were then. The Commission found that state-of-the-art treatments based on decades of research are not being transferred into daily practice, while many outdated and ineffective treatments remain the standard fare of treatment in this day and age. When they were speaking of outdated treatments, they were speaking of those that continue to focus on medical approaches and treatment, while other known roots of distress related to poverty, the environment, and trauma are summarily dismissed, as well as services that are as helpful as medication. The consequences to this are staggering. Between the 30,000 people a year that commit suicide to the financial costs of ongoing dependence on a system from taught helplessness, the cost of jails, and health costs from side effects of medication. And so the Commission strongly recommended the systems shift focus from stabilization to recovery, which includes components such as hope, having a voice, living full lives, and complete remission of symptoms and illness, recognizing that all of that is possible. They stated that services should be recovery-oriented, focusing on goals related to living, learning, working, socializing, and participating fully in people's communities of choice, a real life. The Commission also found that consumer or peer-driven services are vital to this, both within and beyond the mental health system, and the research for this has certainly borne out the unique support that comes from someone who has been there and done that. And there's a reference list for you in your package about this research. Following up on the Presidential New Freedom report, SAMHSA also put together what's known as the 10 components of recovery. These were put out into the community for comment and then finalized. And there's a handout. Handout 1 has this list for you summarized, and 2 has the comparison of the maintenance and recovery model. And so as we see, we are in the middle of change, but getting from here to there is a long road. And hence we are still, and will be for quite a while, in great flux. Even though we may philosophically agree, getting there is still a lot of work to move from risk versus self-determination, maintenance versus recovery, and new beliefs versus older beliefs. Peer specialists in the workforce represent the movement to recovery orientation and have learned their skills in the context of recovery. The self-assessment handout will help you get a sense of where you and your organization are in terms of recovery orientation and practice, because this will be vital for you as a supervisor. You also, as a supervisor, will need to take the lead in order to make sure that you can support people to be open to see where the system needs changing, while not personalizing that the flaws are your flaws, and support the whole system of change for you and the other members of the team from a place of recognizing the value both of the changes and of the peer worker, and of how they all complement each other as we strive for this place of change to better the system and better the work that we're all committed to do. But it can only happen if you, the supervisor, take the lead in this, and we'll talk more in the other units about how to do that. As the system embarks on its own recovery, including the tension and the pain that comes with that, CPSs can play an important and vital role. In this unit, we've talked about the changing system. In the next unit, we'll talk a lot more about peer specialists and how the role came to be and how it can help our system today. Thanks for joining for this unit, and I look forward to seeing you in the next unit. Bye-bye.